So Bill, we actually installed his engine. If you don't know, we do installations on site, and we do installations here in our shop. And we have we had somebody ask us if we would one day, and we just said, well, why not? So we did, and we've done it a numerous amount of times now. So not only do we do the installation and get everything running, by the time you get everything airworthy, we offer first flights, which means we'll go through your entire airplane. We will go through your entire install, and Jan will actually take your plane up for its first flight and give you a list of items that maybe may or may not need to be fixed, or things that you didn't know because you have a second set of eyes or somebody that really knows what they're talking about going through your airplane. So those are just services that we offer, and we did that for Mr. Bill. I'll elaborate a little bit on what we do. If you wanna, do you wanna talk about kind of what we do, the basis?
Well, the big story, or the overlaying story, if you lived on the moon and you're looking down, was that there was some guy in college that didn't have money and wanted to fly. So I built a very easy and got a engine from a junkyard and put it on the back, cobbled together a belt drive, and flew to Oshkosh. And at that point, I was supposed to fly the airlines. I was supposed to do this and that, but I ended up doing just a little company making parts for experimental airplanes, or for engines. From there, that was in 1990. That's a long time ago. I've always been playing with engines and made them into airplane engines. So contrary to what was going on for all these years, was that we were I'm going to jump a long ways now through my whole career. I'm just going to say that we used to be an alternative type of engine. We used to be like, if you didn't have the money, or for a variety of other reasons, you'd go with an auto conversion. Anybody else with the same mind would have an aircraft engine. But that's changed, and it was like probably the last 5 years has been the biggest leap in that change. And now we're at the point where we've become a primary engine delivery company for experimental home-built aircraft. And then particularly in certain airplanes, we started specializing in the Zenith line of airplanes, and we've been working closely with them. We're not actually Zenith, but we have a good rapport together as far as, showcasing their airplanes, our engines, and so forth and so on. And it's turned all the way around that these auto engines that are converted to be an airplane engine are more popular than other engines. We actually change engines from traditional engines. Like an O200, most people that fly that wish they had a Viking 150 or a 130 or something like that. So that's what we do. We're just basically following what's popular or what's modern in the automotive industry. And the latest engine now is...
we'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, but basically that's it. We're just kind of started doing a couple of parts for home-built planes, and now we are a leading provider of engines for experimental home-built airplanes.
I think something that's really important to mention, and Kit Planes in their recent engine buyer's guide kind of did a good job of mentioning that, and that a lot of times auto conversions got a bad rap due to lack of support, or it's okay.
It's okay.
or just, cobbling together one or two engines and stuff of that nature. But there is a big difference when you use something that is fully supported. You have a group of people that are standing behind it and are a real professional company, and also not making their own pistons and changing a lot of the internal parts that you have some kind of one-off type thing that you can't get parts for moving forward in the future. And that's really important for us, especially during COVID and those times where a lot of people were having part availability issues. We did not, and it's still able to be affordable at that same time.
Sourcing.
I got you. Okay. So a lot of, so this didn't happen until we had competition. Nobody really cared what the history was. Viking was selling engines, you bought it. But the competition tried to kind of jump on our tail feathers and ride our curtails and use the same kind of platform, but turn it around and saying that we used junkyard engines. And the reality is we have one place that we get a large portion of our engines from, and they have stipulations that we want with these, and we get them. A lot of times it's shipping damage and stuff like that, hail damage, shipping damage, stuff of that nature, with a full history on these engines. So it's not a surprise. We have over 1,500 engines in the field now, and I think we have warrantied one engine ever, and it actually didn't need to be warrantied, and there was nothing wrong with it.
Now, I'm going to jump in as far as, because you already touched on it, the sourcing thing as far as competition. Obviously, every company has competition. And there are light sport aircraft engines, and of course, if they do make the engine from scratch, one of their selling points would be like, well, we are a true airplane engine. We look like a true airplane engine. We have fins on it. It's a made from scratch aircraft engine. But like Alyssa said, as the years went by and they saw that we could buy an entire super modern engine block with all the things that it has, and we can provide starters and alternators and things very inexpensively. Their forums like we're having right now.
Their theories changed to where they were all aircraft parts to.
Yeah, it used to be like, oh, we have aircraft this and there, and now they say, well, maybe the selling point is that we actually use, and of course we knew this all along, that those engines were actually built by parts from all kinds of different stuff. Buick pistons, Harley Davidson stators, connecting rods from over here and all that kind of stuff. So they really just had had a box that they used all these mass-produced parts. And then they said, why don't we also tell people that you don't have to buy our alternator from us, you can get it from a Harley Davidson. And so what we have done all along is now becoming popular. People are understanding that mass production is going to save our hobby. You know, the fact that you can buy a coil for $30 instead of a magneto for $250 or $650.
And that goes back into mass production, which is a big part of our platform, is having those parts available to everybody and having them in such a large quantity. I mean, Honda makes as much in an hour as a Lycoming does in a year. So that allows that and expands that onto you guys and what you're doing. You don't have to, a lot of times I don't hear from people until they're 500-600 hours into flying when they maybe needed a part, because they've been able to be self-sufficient for so long because they didn't necessarily need it. And we have a lot of information available to those. So engine models, this has changed a little bit from last year to this year. I'm gonna kind of go over the basis of some of the engine models that we have. From our lowest horsepower, we have a 90 horsepower engine. That's a Mitsubishi Mirage engine, and it's about the same installed weight as that of a 912. So it's really good for the smaller airplanes like the Sonics or a 701 or something of that nature. Moving on up to our Viking 130, that is our 1.5 liter, and a lot of you will see it in a lot of these slides as time goes on. That's the engine that is also in that airplane there. That was in California, and there were some races and stuff going on. And that's our dealer, Ivan, in California at Quality Sport Planes. So he's been flying behind one of our engines for quite some time.
All right, I'm gonna pop in here real quick to talk about our sponsors. As you know, I can't do this all on my own. We got to have somebody to help fuel that truck. We try really hard to work with sponsors that provide a good service and a good quality product. So let's talk about those guys right now. Dynon Avionics at Dynon.com, the premier provider of glass panel avionics systems for experimental and light sport aircraft. Wide Open Door Company at WideOpenDoorCo.com, your premier destination for high-quality doors, including aircraft hangar doors. Warp Drive Propellers at WarpDriveInc.com, providing quality, solid carbon fiber propellers for many light sport and experimental aircraft. South Mississippi Light Aircraft at FlySMLA.com, an independent master repair center and a training facility for Rotax engines. Edge Performance at EdgePerformance.no, specializing in fuel injection conversions, performance upgrades, and complete engines for your aircraft. Pioneer Control Grips at PioneerControlGrips.com, Comfort, convenience, and style. Handcrafted custom wooden grips with many styles to choose from. And visit our website at experimentalaircraftchannel.com for new videos and easy-to-navigate playlists, and so much more. Speaking of fueling that truck, if you guys want to join us on our Patreon page, become patrons of this channel, just search on Patreon for Experimental Aircraft Channel. Sign up at several different levels, and at certain levels we even have scheduled video meetings once a month. So check that out.
And we have, firewall forward, like many of you know, we have for over 45, 50 different aircraft. So we supply everything that's really complete, and we'll walk through those in a little bit. The Viking 150, you heard a couple people talk about that, and we have 2 engines outside, or 2 airframes outside with a variable pitch and one with a ground adjustable prop, one on the Zenith 750 and one on the Rans S21. So take a look at those installs as you get the opportunity if that's something you're interested in. And Matt, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. Did you fly in this morning or did you drive?
I flew to Palatka. I got a friend up there, and I was worried about getting out on Sunday. So
Understand.
I think I'll park it there.
So Matt has a 750 STOL, and he actually, with a variable pitch propeller, he came in from Colorado quite a few weeks ago now, flew in from Colorado with his airplane to Florida. So it's quite a journey. I don't know if any of you have flown that in such a small, little, slow-moving airplane, but that is quite a feat, and he took some time to do it. But it's just another reason why we love what we do. It's easy to maintain. You're just getting in the plane, you're turning it on, and you're leaving. You're not worrying about EGTs and CHTs and mixtures and burning a ton of oil and carrying oil in your baggage and all those types of things. So moving on up, we have our 140 turbo, which some are picking up today. That was our newest engine, and it's the 1.2. It's 1.2, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, 1.2 turbo coming out of the quite a few cars. It's like a Buick Encore. It comes out of the Chevy Trax that we have one outside that we also tested the actual car engine that it's in as well, in the car itself. And that's because it's a similar weight to our Viking 130. It's become really popular, and we'd like to start moving in that direction, kind of moving forward. But outside of our lineup, it is not a Honda. It's actually a GM product, and it's a 3-cylinder. So it has some differences compared to the other options that we have. And that's also what is in our low wing outside. We had a 130, we swapped out for a 140 turbo. We have the new 175 engine. I'll have him elaborate on that one in a second because it's very new. We're gonna start, they're not selling yet, but they will here in the next month or so. We have the 195 turbo. A lot of you are doing that on the Super Duty. It's probably the most used platform for that engine. Because of the STOL performance on a lot of our engines and because of the gearbox and the thrust numbers, we get incredibly good takeoffs, and that's important for a lot of people that are flying out of short fields. So it also enables you with the gearbox to have really good thrust numbers on your cruisers if you want to fly out of short fields. So it makes your airplane a lot more usable.
I'm going to just run through the engines.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is our inline inverted Tiger Moth engine.
No, you're so full of it. Yeah, no.
Now this is just if you've never seen the inside of an engine. You can see it here. This guy, been around in the Honda Fit for many years. They started out with a slightly smaller engine, then they went, well, not in displacement, but then they went with the direct injection back in 2016, and that's been our 130 horsepower engine. Inline 4-cylinder, dual overhead cam, direct injected, gearbox, our gearbox, original intake manifold, little nip and denso alternator, mounting brackets where you can mount it to your airplane. We supply all the things that you need. Our torsion dampening system. Most famous flight on this engine was Dave Talema doing the 48 states in 10 days without adding any oil. So he left from Texas and ended up in Texas, flew through Oshkosh, stayed there, and it was 48 states, no issues.
Landing in 48 states, not just flying over.
In less than 10 days or 10 days. Over here is the engine that probably will slowly replace this engine. Honda is not making the Fit anymore. We still have plenty of them. Automotive, of course, is huge. There's thousands and thousands of engines available, so it's not like just because Honda is not selling it, we can't get them. But that being said, did start looking at a replacement, and it's this one and this one. This one started first, 150 horsepower, inline 4-cylinder engine, single overhead cam, variable intake cam. Our gearbox, this gearbox has the universal front plate on it, which makes it fit all of our models now. A little bit lighter, bigger bearings, but lighter housings on this one. As it progresses, everything is slowly getting better and better as we make new batches of parts. This is the one Steve Opperly has in his stall. There's a couple of videos there on YouTube about the performance. It's incredible. Kathy Anderson, that was in the corner there, right here, she has it outside in an S21 with the VIP, or variable in-flight propeller system. Now, her and her husband, it took me a little bit of time to convince them to go with the VIP, variable in-flight propeller. And it was because traditionally a variable propeller on an engine gives you just like a little bit extra. But if you put it on an engine that's geared and has a very large RPM range, and more importantly, where you can fly it with the throttle wide open and just keep loading the engine with more and more pitch, it makes a really big difference. So now they're very happy with their engine. They've flown to Boston a couple of times, Colorado. They fly a lot. They do a lot of long distance travel with their S21. And according to Bob and Kathy as well, they don't see any need for any more power in that little airplane. So I always ask people, well, what fuel flow are you comfortable with in your airplane when you build it? So people, 6, maybe 7 gallons an hour. And then it's like, well, maybe you don't need our 195 in your S21 then, because you're just carrying a bigger engine, and it's a 10 gallon an hour engine. So those are the things to think about. Back to this guy, Chevy Trax this year. Really, really good reviews on the car. There's been some of these little Chevy engines that have bad reputation in the past.
That was completely different engine, though.
Totally different engine.
That's, people confuse the two, so.
So it's important to point that out. This was a new development between General Motors and Opel in Germany. It's a clean slate design. It's a really, really fantastic engine. I've been looking at it, building it up, flying it a lot in our 650. Very happy with it. It's turbocharged. It's direct injected. It has a inline rail of injectors straight down, and the plugs are straight down. So there's increased efficiency from that. It also has the little nip and denser alternator. It's all set up to be mounted in an airplane. We machine some of the parts, your throttle brackets, a bunch of the stuff. It has one thing inside that I'm going to tell you about, because as soon as you say, well, I want to use that 1.2 thing from Viking, and is that the one that destroys itself when the belt goes? People have those things, right? Yes, it does have an internal belt in the oil. It's becoming more popular. When they first came out with it in the car, they had some teetering problems. Honda's been using it on all their smaller motors, and Chevy now has, or Opel has it inside here. It's a nice belt. It does run inside. It is in the oil. As far as an airplane engine, well, how do I inspect it, all that kind of stuff? Well, in the car, it's supposed to go 140,000 miles. Well, how do you know the condition of it? Well, you know the condition from draining the oil, looking at your oil. Obviously, if there's any wear on the belt, you're going to find little particles in your oil. I also want to work with companies like Blackstone Laboratories that do oil reports and stuff, and that will be like the new thing. Like, well, they list like how much lead, how much this, how much molybdenum, how much.
Yeah, we recommend that when people do maintenance and stuff. That way you have a log on everything that's going on your engine. Blackstone does a really good job at lining all that up, and they have enough oil samples over the years of our engines. They know exactly what to expect, what to see, what those standard levels are versus what is high and what's low. I know there's some other oil companies out there that are maybe a little bit lower cost and stuff like that, of that nature, but they also don't have as much back history on our engines to be able to provide a kind of a clear and a concise idea of what to expect from
Yeah, we've been happy with them. They do a good job.
Yeah, so, and a lot of people will do that on their annuals. Depends on how much you're flying. Dave, when he flew a ridiculous amount of hours in just a few years, he obviously did it a little bit more. So as you're changing your oil, get that done. There's no reason not to. It gives you a good idea of what your gearbox is doing. It gives you a good idea on what your engine is doing internally.
Now I want to point out just really quickly why I'm so kind of proud of this engine and why I like it so much. Hey guys, I'm going to turn it on the side and you can see the turbocharger. And here's the actuator for the turbocharger. So normally what you would have is you would have a turbocharger traditionally on an engine, and there's vacuum from the manifold that holds it open when you start the engine, and the turbocharger holds the wastegate, meaning the turbocharger is not really spooled up in the beginning. So it holds it open, and you get more and more and more power as you drive in your car or whatever, or your race car, and then eventually it'll start closing the wastegate, and you get that vroom at the end, like lots of extra power at the end. This is completely different with modern engines, okay? It works backwards from that. The wastegate, which means it bleeds off the exhaust, is always closed. So what's the big deal? Well, first of all, how can they do that? They can do it because it's direct injected, it sprays fuel right into the cylinder, it doesn't have a chance of detonation from the cooling effect of the fuel and so forth and so on. So they can run high compression with low octane fuel. We actually run higher octane fuel just for safety. But now they can run the turbocharger all the time. And what's the big deal with that? Well, one, you don't need a muffler because it's always going through the little impeller in the turbo. So it's very quiet without a muffler. And number two, the torque is instantaneous. Like the peak torque is like at 1200 RPM, like right off idle, you have peak torque. So flying the engine, you are not solely relying on just more and more RPM. You actually have an enormous amount of torque at all RPMs. So that's a cool feature of it. Moving down here, this is our latest one. As far as engines, it is the 175. I got it. So, the 175 is kind of going a little bit backwards as far as Honda's latest engines and all that, in one sense. But in another sense, it's a good choice for us. It's Honda's 2-liter engine. It's been around since 2005 or maybe even earlier. It's what, they call it like the K series of engine. If you look like YouTube videos and stuff, the teenagers, whatever, they've always it's been the engine of choice for like playing with. More
Racing,
power,
yeah.
like you hear about 1,300 horsepower engines and all that. Those are boosted K-series engines, and that's the Honda 2-liter, okay? It's an inline 2-liter engine, dual overhead cam. It's been available in the cars all the way from 158 horsepower to 205 horsepower, like, production cars, and obviously a lot more for aftermarket stuff. Has a couple of features. The 1.8 was a follow-on actually to this engine. Both engines have what's like a girdle at the bottom, which strengthens it has a sandwiched piece in here, which rather than individual bearing caps like the 130 has, see, it doesn't have this little piece in here. It's got individual bearing caps because it's a smaller engine. It does a good job. To take out even more power out of the same engines, put this girdle in here. It's a sandwich thing. It actually ties all the bottom end bearings together, and then a structural oil pan onto that. So that's going to be an engine that we will take 175 horsepower out of. As I was mentioning earlier with Kathy, they have plenty of power of this in the S21. I think, my opinion, doesn't mean that can't be done. The 195 in the S21, sure. But I think this is the in-between. I think this is the new and coming. 175 horsepower, a little bit more displacement, 2-liter, dual overhead cam, very simple engine, very reliable. It's been around for a long time. This and a VIP propeller, S21 or even a Super Duty, if I was building now, I'd go that way. This is in all of the new Hondas. It's a very popular engine because what they call downsizing. Smaller displacement, turbocharged. It's similar to this one over here, turbocharged, direct injected. There's more things that, and I'm going to get off the top because we have more to talk about, but another thing about, and this is similar to this, like I said, another thing is you see here, you don't have a giant cast iron like in the old turbocharged cars. Big giant cast iron manifold here tying the cylinders together. It's got a tiny little opening. Turbo goes right on the engine. The simplicity of modern turbocharged engines is back. I mean, it's there. It's actually almost simpler than a muffled engine because now you need mufflers and pipes and extensions and stuff. Here you got a turbocharger, bolts right to here, also functions as your muffler. It's oil cooled and liquid cooled, so it doesn't glow like a traditional aircraft turbo. You don't have any spool down time, spool up time, anything like that. You just start it like any other engine. So those are the models that we have. Specific questions on any model, obviously we'll be here to answer.
Going to move on to availability. A common question nowadays for airplanes and engines alike is talking about lead times. For a lot of companies, you can wait 1 or 2 years, and for a small brief moment there, for many, you were looking at 3 or 4 years. And then with no guarantee what the pricing is going to be when it's time to deliver. So that is a big deal if you think you're going to build an airplane and you need to time things, the loss of motivation, but not only that, if you buy in at $30,000 and now they're telling you you're going to owe $40,000 when it gets here, that's a huge budget killer for a lot of people, and obviously isn't great for timing and stuff like that. Not to mention the parts and everything are going to be very expensive for certain kind of engines as well. But we have, I like to tell people 2 to 4 weeks. Lead time. I can always ship next day if we need to, but for our own reasons, if we want to get things powder coated, fit into a timely schedule, and still take care of our day-to-day customers, it's easier if we can just schedule about 2 weeks out. So lead time is no issue here. I tell people just wait till you're ready. About the time you start looking at your fuel system is about the time to start looking at when you're going to have your engine, because things will start falling together pretty quickly about that time. So availability, no issue really whatsoever. That goes for parts as well. So there's not really any issues with any of that. That's not a problem here. So I don't need to elaborate on that too much, but it's a common question. Dealers. We do have dealers in New Zealand, Australia, California, and then we also have them down in southern Mexico, who also handles Guatemala, and our Australian dealer also handles the Philippines. So we've expanded a lot over the years. Our Australian dealer alone has sold about 40 engines in the past 3 years. So he's an incredible resource out there. And I mean, when you're far away and your time zones are so very different, it makes it really helpful for people to have somebody to call and talk to, and is very knowledgeable. He had a 750 Stoll, and he took off a UL Power and put on a Viking 130 with a variable pitch prop because he couldn't get adequate cooling in the air-cooled engine in a slow Stoll airplane. And that was very difficult for him in hot temperatures in Australia. He could not utilize the Stoll performance of his airplane due to the first engine choice that he made. The worst thing you can do is make a bad choice the first time and change it later. Half of our sales are taking off O200s, UL Powers, non-deliveries of other engines, and so on and so forth. So make the right decision the first time. It will save you a lot of money in the long run and a lot of heartache too. So lots of dealers out there for those that are, gotcha.
I didn't know that compressor had that feature. We just bought a new compressor, and it has this feature that scares you every 1 hour. It pops the bottom thing electronically to like get rid of moisture, and that's what it's doing.
It's been real fun this last
But now
week.
you know.
So types of aircraft, like I kind of talked about a little bit ago, we have anywhere between 40, can we unplug that for now? Do we need it? Hey, because it's going to do that. So we have between 40 and 50 different aircraft kits that we've done over the years. There is a section right up here that many of you might have noticed, and on the other side as well, and they are full of cowling molds. So we just recently worked with Zenith, got their CAD models, did some new cowlings for the Zenith because we sell so many. Cowlings molds are not cheap. They were about $35,000, and we've got to make plugs from them from there. So this business is not a cheap business, and that is why, you know, cowlings are $1,500 along with materials. But we have everything from kit foxes to RANs to just aircraft to Zenith, obviously, to BD4s and everything in between. So likely if you have an airplane that you're not sure about, not only do we have probably a cowling for it, but we're also going to have, you know, something close if you have something that's kind of a one-off that will work. You can only make a firewall so large.
And we're kind of passing by the sourcing thing, so I'm going to wheel this back out. But this is like what we would get as far as an engine if we bought an engine. So I just wanted to show you that. Again, people have maybe different conceptions of how we source and get our engines.
They think we have like 75,000 mile engines that we get and refurbish.
We do get calls. People want to like, well, can I supply my own engine? I found one. It's got 32,000 miles. It's like we haven't touched that 32,000 mile engine ever, you know. So but that's how they come in, nice and clean like that.
So yeah, lots of types of aircraft. If you have the opportunity, you can take a look on our website and our YouTube and see that. And there's lots of things that are flying out there that many don't know. I mean, we supply engines for helicopter saws that our 90 horsepower actually does that cut down the trees for the power line. So there's a lot of things that we do behind the scenes and a lot of things that also can't be shared behind the scenes with research and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things out there. We're doing a lot of cool things all the time. So if you have an idea of an aircraft, keep in mind that we probably have something for you. And
just so we finish up, because as you see, we have a lot of things here. Since we're on the cowling thing, let's get that out of the way. So what Alyssa is talking about, a mold, basically the way a mold starts is in the computer with the drawing of the airplane. And then a plug is made, a CNC plug, and that's smoothed out and everything, but it's mostly done on a CNC machine. And then on that plug, you would then make a mold, and this will be that mold. And you get it, you know, to a certain surface finish, and then you wax it up, and you can start making cowlings for different airplanes. And of course, it has to fit the firewall and so forth and so on. So that's the whole process, and that's what she's saying, that we have, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 for every airplane, because we also change. We change engines, people change their firewall. KitFox has different boot cowlings or whatever they call it. So everything's a little bit different. But we have a mold for most home-built airplanes, and in some cases we have 2 or 3 for the same airplane, depending on the engine model. And as far as how the cowlings are made, people ask us, can you make us a carbon fiber cowling? We can, but we don't, because fiberglass is easy to work with. Also, there's always compromises in everything. We use gel coat. Why do we use gel coat? Because you get a cowling that's nice, it's finished, it's ready for you to scuff and paint, prime and paint. If we were to give you a raw fiberglass, a little thinner, maybe a 1 pound lighter cowling, you would have a lot of work to do. So we found the compromise between cost, efficiency, ease of finishing, and so forth. So that's a typical top cowling. I think this is for an S21.
Yes. Excuse me, sir. I'm going to move slides. Move your hiney.
Hey, if I could.
Yes.
When I was trying to decide what I was going to do for an engine, and I was looking at all the various options, pretty much anything I looked at was going to require that I do a custom cowling for my engine, custom motor mount, and then all of the bits and pieces, including like the exhaust system, and you know, that became a pretty daunting thing for me. And then I saw you guys at Zenith, and you had firewall forward, including, I mean, the fluids that you're putting in. So when you provided something that you had flown already, and you'd flown the propeller, you provided the spinner, you provided everything necessary for me to finish from firewall all the way to the nose.
And I think a lot of people really take that for granted. We get a lot of calls now with everything the way it is, and home building has evolved over many years. People forget what home building really used to be. And now we all offer kits. And a lot do not offer kits, especially tested kits on airframes. It's more of a concept, and you're going to have to figure out the rest. So we get a lot of calls. I mean, we try to offer pass-throughs and even wiring and wiring tools. We try to make it as complete as possible because we've been in that situation. But every single aircraft engine company out there, you are going to get the bare minimum, and you are really going to have to source things. And people kind of forget that there's going to be a lot more involved than the things that we offer. And they'll call me up and they're like, well, I saw this in a video, why isn't it included? And I'm like, well, was it on your invoice? Well, no. I said, well, that was in the list of extras. Just because we supply something, I mean, we have landing gear brackets and all kinds of stuff. We can sell you anything under the world, but if I included that all to you and you looked at a $40,000 invoice because you wanted every little item, you know, you'd start looking at things a little bit differently. A lot of what we offer is not necessarily required. It is a benefit of something that we have tested, we have tried, we know will work for you, so you do not have to do that on your own. So that's a big part of what we do.
And because of that, like at an air show, we'd be standing there and we're like, okay, so the engine is 16.9 and da 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 da. So the invoice at the end is 29. But that's propeller, spinner, every nut and bolt, batteries and all that stuff. So then but in their mind,
they're like, now the engine's $29,000.
Now the engine's 29.
And they're comparing it to like a Rotax, it's 29 to start just for the engine. So that's why, you know, a lot of times on websites, I just send a customized invoice to everybody. Many of you have probably seen an estimate before you purchased, and that was so you could actually see all the items that are really included, because it's not a fair comparison to compare an engine to something that has a variable pitch propeller on it and everything else under the sun. So we'll start in on gearbox construction. Do you want to talk about our gearbox
we'll cover that
and
real
that part
quick.
of it?
Yeah, so basically,
And people can take a look at some of these closer a little bit later if you'd like, that
obviously
are not on them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this, Patrick. Patrick brought his gearbox in because he wanted to go from a standard propeller to a possibility of a variable propeller. And he brought it in the other day, 2 days ago, and he said, I want to leave this here, you know, for you guys to upgrade it so that I can use a variable pitch propeller with your engine. And I said, well, do you want to do it? And he's sitting right over here. He said, well, yeah. So me and him just kind of worked. I was just like telling him what to do, like do this, do this, do this. And he did it. He's a mechanical person. And basically, we built this for him from his non-variable. So what we have is traditionally, we'll start with some parts, a front housing and a rear plate. That's the heart of the gearbox. As the years have gone by, like any product that gets more improved upon, things are now lighter, stronger, more refined. We have actually less aluminum involved and larger bearings, and that's just the way we have seen that things had to be done. And our gearbox now reliably runs up to 200 horsepower. These are all, as you know, CNC machined. We're not a machine shop. We don't actually machine the parts. I design the parts, but we don't machine the parts. We don't have the time.
We would be machining all day. So we get everything made in hundreds and hundreds, and our gears made in thousands. So
yeah, gears are like all the wooden boxes back there. It's all full of gears. Talking about the gears, I didn't bring a gear. We can show you a gear later if you want. But gears for gearboxes that go in airplanes do have to be made correctly. Okay, they have to be forged for the purpose. They have to be shaved. They have to be heat treated. They just have to be right. They have to have the right splines. They have to have the right threads for holding the prop on.
There is a massive difference between the gears that we make and people trying to put together their own little gearbox situation.
And that's
these are purpose-built, designed, and done and made properly. And that is a big deal when it comes to an auto conversion, because people are concerned about, well, what about the gearbox? Well, what about it? If it's designed properly, it's not a problem. And it actually offers a lot of benefits for everybody.
And it's
we'll dive into
modular
those.
too, in the sense that, you know, like your engine and your gearbox are two different things. So if you have a prop strike, you don't have a ruined engine. I mean, you
Well,
have,
yeah, we'll dive into that.
yeah, you have 4 bolts and you now have a gearbox and an engine. And this can be repaired separately from the engine. This can be UPS to Viking, and it can be fixed in a day. So you're not really stuck with that. But back to the construction of it, just basic 6061 T6 aluminum billet, and it's machined from that. Mostly roller bearings now, a couple of ball bearings. Everything is indexed with pins. The feature that Patrick added to his gearbox was the fact that the propeller hole, or the flange, the center of the flange, the shaft, can be hollow with a 5/16 hole. So we drill that all the way through, and there's a seal added to the back. So now basically there's a clear passage through here, and you don't have to use an electrically, well, it's still an electrically actuated propeller. The difference is that most traditional electric propellers have a motor out in the spinner. Okay, in order to get power to that motor, you need slip rings, you need brushes. It all gets complicated and heavy. You got copper slip rings and brushes and the motors and gearboxes out in the spinner. Costly if you break it. Very expensive little gearbox out there driving the propeller, turning the blades. Here we're going to talk about propellers in a while, but basically the shaft that pushes and pulls on the propeller is just basically goes right through here. And the actual mechanism to push and pull is just a simple linear actuator that can be anywhere on the engine. So that's what makes that simple. Want to mention this little piece here. It's a centering bushing. What's so special about it? It doesn't do anything other than when you install the gearbox. You tap that into the crankshaft of the engine, and then you slide the gearbox onto that. What's so important? Why is that important? Because we have a system where we mount the gearbox using standoffs and 1/2-inch bolts, and it gets torqued down and everything. As soon as you run the engine, this is a disposable item. Okay, this is going to wear a little bit. It doesn't actually like rotate on here. It spins with the engine, but because there's a rubber coupling involved as well, there's always some motion between this and the engine. You know, they're gonna move just slightly in relationship to each other at times. And then you're gonna get a little play in this bushing. It doesn't do anything while the engine's running. It's only there to make a very precise alignment of the gearbox to the center of the crankshaft during installation. So if you ran it for 5 minutes and you said, oh man, I forgot this little thing behind the gearbox, and you take it back off, new bushings or not a new bushing? New bushing.
A lot of people forget that, and we have harped on it for years and years and years. So if you have a prop strike, you know, you would replace the centering bushing and the torsion damper, and we would obviously inspect that. But people were like, oh, I wanted to look at something, so I just took the gearbox off, and then I put it back on. I said, when did you do that? They're like, oh, well, I said, you need a new centering bushing. What are you doing? I said, that's harped on everywhere to do that. And if you don't do that, it is not centered. And then they call me back with a picture of their torsion dampener that's spread into pieces and don't understand why. It's because you didn't center it on the actual engine.
It cannot run like
It's not actually people showing up, it's the Ring doorbell going off that's putting them off.
Because the rubber dampers, they're very forgiving, and you know, and they actually are what transfers the power through the system. But if they're not centered, the engine will run just fine, the gearbox will run just fine, but you're introducing heat, you know, to them because they're not centered. So this should be looked upon as an installation tool. So you might want to have 2 or 3 in your toolbox if you ever think you're going to remove your gearbox. So just
They're
wanted to mention that.
$25, guys, and it will keep everything together in the way it's supposed to be. Please do not cheapen out on a $25 part, okay?
Torsion dampeners in between the gearbox and the engine. Yes, you can find them commercially. They're all different kinds, so just get it from Melissa. These are German made and they will last.
You want to elaborate a little bit on why they're cut, because people always don't understand why we cut them, and
it comes like on the bottom of a Mercedes or BMW, some of the Corvettes, they use it as as a shaft coupling, like a, for the main drive shaft, one at each end. And they come as a round circle, a disc. They basically are like that. Somehow they make it round. I don't know. And then we take and machine them and turn them into little links. The reason for that is I found years ago, if you use the links, center the gearbox and use little links, and the engine is pulling the gearbox with the links, that's the absolute best scenario. There's plenty of air around them. They're self-centering. We allow them to slide back and forth a little bit on the pins. So they're very free, in a sense, back there, so they can move a little bit. Or someone might like look here, maybe there's a part number, and they buy the whole thing, okay? And then, it's got to be better to have, the whole thing. It's stronger, right? Well, the whole torsion dampening is an art. It has to be, the right density, the durometer, rubber, all that kind of stuff. So if you put the whole thing on there, it's going to run rough. The whole engine's going to run rough.
And it's not tuned for it.
And you're adding more stress into the drive pins that are on here and all that. So it's all tested as a unit, obviously. And we're not saying, like when Alyssa said too, about the gears have to be perfect and right and made in quantities and forged and so forth. We're not saying that nobody else can like make in their backyard or in their garage a one-off auto conversion. We're just saying that it's not easy. It's just not easy. And if you do a belt drive, it seems easy. I'm just going to buy, just do a belt drive. Well, belt drive has their own source of problems. You're like, what are you going to do? Like put a pulley right on the crankshaft and break the crank? Or are you going to put a greased bearing out here and then that heats up and it throws all the grease? Or are you going to put this belt on the engine on a aluminum structure, and then the engine heats up and the belt drive is cold, so the belt is never the right tension? Or you're going to run 120 or 30 horsepower with an idler that's going to fail. So none of it is easy.
I also want to elaborate a little bit on maintenance. Your gearbox, you have a temperature probe in there. You have sight glasses in there. All of those things are to tell you exactly what that is doing. So to have the ability, it's not just going to stop unless you didn't put oil in it. You're going to see, for some reason, if your trends that you're used to just start raising and raising and raising and raising, you're going to have plenty of time to go land and maybe check it out or send it in. We'll have it back the same day. Some situations we can ship you one out the same day. If you have a prop strike, which in these STOL style airplanes and the way people like to fly them, it happens. It can happen due to lack of transition training. It can happen due to just a small little incident. And it can happen because of a gust of wind. It can happen. The difference is between an air-cooled engine, where you're going to have a lot of costly repairs, a lot of time, take your engine off and possibly send it somewhere. That's a pretty big ordeal. Whereas if you were out on a mountaintop somewhere and you got to go into the city to just send that to us, we can have you and your plane out of there by the next day. You're not stranded, you're not stuck. We have propellers in stock. We have suppliers that can get those to you quickly. You're not waiting 8 to 12 months on the ground.
Yeah, and then
Steve?
Some people will take it to the next level and they'll say, well, Viking is irresponsible. It would never just replace that. And what about the crankshaft? And well, everything we do, first, it's not certified, okay? It's not a PT6. You have to use certain kind of judgment.
You also have to realize that if you make things too extravagant to do, people will not do any of it and carry on. And that's the world we live in. People make decisions, and in experimental, you get to make those decisions. So we try to make it as dummy-proof as possible.
So what I was going to say just at the end of that was you analyze the situation. Well, how much of the prop did you break? Did it break at the root? Did you just damage the tips? Whatever. Did you tear the shock absorbers? Whatever. And if it's a minor damage, just the tips went, and these things are fine and everything, you're not gonna damage the internals of the engine doing that. We know that from experience.
Steve?
So.
I kind of mentioned it when I introduced myself, but how I met Jan and Alyssa was this video that I saw of Jan going through a gearbox, and he mentioned who the builder was of the airplane. I'm like, holy cow, that's the airplane that I'm looking at. I spoke to the guy that was selling it, and he scared himself. He knew that if he was in his 182, where he was, doing a little bit of the wheel burn, as I call it when I instructed, from the main to the nose gear, that he should pull the yoke back, put the power in. But because the stall was so slow, he's already touched down and he's under, 35 miles an hour. He thought he could save it. Well, that thought went away when the nose gear collapsed and he struck the pavement. And he wasn't idle, and he had I can't remember the name of the prop that was on there, but it was a carbon fiber prop. It didn't shatter. It was actually so slow and low power that it just bent backwards under the airplane. He had a mechanic, a super smart guy of the flying community. I think it's called Twin Lakes. It's north of the Aiken area. And he took the gearbox off and sent it to Viking, and Jan went through it. And when I saw the video and so forth, and him sending it back, and the mechanic telling me they've run it up and no problems with the motor, that kind of thing. Took a little bit of a leap of faith, but I went with it, and we had that engine. We ran it for about probably 20 hours or so before we decided to upgrade to the bigger motor. But that engine ran flawless. There was no problem with it, and I'm kind of proof of the fact that gearbox saved that engine that was on that airplane that I bought. So, if it's a low power type thing, that the rubber damper in that gearbox will save you a motor.
I want to thank you, Steve. And there's been, Darren, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing is you ever driven a standard car, install the engine, you don't go out and rebuild the engine.
Yep.
It's the same thing with a power off prop drive.
Yep.
You install the engine.
We had an unfortunate incident at a Zenith gathering a couple years ago. We flew in our Super Duty from Florida to Missouri, and there was a huge divot in the grass that was hidden by the grass. And I mean, we took a 7-inch drop. And luckily it was us and not a certified airplane or something like that. So, we trimmed the blades the next morning and took off back to Florida. So because it wasn't a bad strike, and we did all the necessary repairs that were needed when we got home. But it allows us to not be stranded where we are. I want to kind of jump into insurance. People think because you have an auto conversion, somehow you can't be insured, all that kind of stuff. I can promise you that you will be insured. It's more pilot than it is your aircraft and airplane engine. Yes, a lot of auto conversions cannot be insured if you have a one-off type situation. If you have a company that doesn't have a lot of fleet hours, there are a lot of conversions out there that have been selling for years and years, and there's not enough flying examples. I think everybody that I know, if they choose to have insurance, has no problem getting insurance through multiple people. I have a broker that you can call, Scott Sky Smith. He's at the Zenith workshop every year. Wonderful guy, very knowledgeable. And let's say, Steve, what's your yearly insurance?
It's around what you pay for a car.
Yeah.
What I equate it to.
Is that because of the car engine?
That might be.
Yeah.
But I pay about $1,500 a year.
There you go. So he's about $1,500.
How about a good pilot?
Yeah. Yeah, Mike.
I am a born I'm a brand new pilot. Brand new building a plane, experimental engine, and I'm at go. I call out a company out of SAC, but they're quoting me $3,500 for
Yeah.
getting started. And I thought that, that's
For getting started and the value of a Super Duty as well. You have a more expensive.
Super Duty is, but they basically, for experimental aircraft and engine, was a 10% ad.
Yeah.
And then I get a 5% discount if I do the wings program.
Yep.
That's it.
So it's, that's, to me, that was pretty reasonable, because if I was buying a Cessna and doing it, it was almost as much money.
Yep. And so one thing that we found out by talking to a couple brokers, especially again during the kind of COVID era, we had a situation where the insurance companies were actually not liking the Lycomings and Continentals, your standard type aircraft engines, because they couldn't get the parts.
Yeah.
And if they can't get the parts, that meant that they had to replace the entire engine, which meant the full value of the engine. So that is not something an insurance company wants to hear. And keep in mind, if you have a prop strike, a lot of people aren't even claiming insurance, and if they do, they're just replacing the blades. So I've had a couple insurance people, and they're like, yeah, but what else? And I said, no, that's it. And he goes, What do you mean that's it? I mean, they're confused. So if they're having to pay very little to repair this and they're getting, a yearly out of you, it's much better than having to do some big heavy hauling repairs that you have to do in some of the traditional aircraft engines. So
Very agitated. I thought it was very.
nobody build your airplane with hammers, please. Just, that's not how we build airplanes.
Now there was a little thing here we were talking about why things are the way they are. Alyssa mentioned with the insurance, this thing about like the reason that you can't get insurance on a certain airplane because they know that they can't get parts for that airplane or that engine. Now, here's just a little bit different, but I think I'm right. Why is it that a Rotax 915 is so expensive? Here's my theory. Because I look at the parts. I go in and I look at like the ECU, and it's like $8,000. I look at their turbocharger in the parts catalog, not the engine now. The turbocharger is like $7,900. A fuse block is like $3,200. Anybody have a theory of why that would be? Why?
We're theorizing.
Yeah, why in the world could it possibly be that for like a fuse block, $3,400?
Yeah, because they can. That's part of it. But
no, I don't think so. Here's what I think. From what I understand, having talked to people, if you sell to the military, like a drone engine or something, you cannot sell the same product to civilian market for like $200 for a fuse block and then charge them $3,200. Because you lose that contract like that. So if you want to charge our military $3,500 for a fuse block for that engine, you have to charge the same price in a civilian as well.
But
So I think
the
that's why it's so
prices-
expensive.
When people,
Yeah.
it's really interesting when, we've had a few instances where people have maybe burnt up an ECU by shorting something. And obviously they're going to have to buy a new ECU. And it's $1,500 for a new ECU. So I really don't recommend that you short out your ECU. But, compared to the other prices in the market, it's not even close to what's being charged.
Yeah,
And-
we feel like really bad.
Yeah, we feel bad. I'm like, I'm sorry. But that's just how it goes. Maintenance, we talked a little bit about doing the Blackstone lab reports and stuff like that. That's an important part of it. I also have some great printouts and maintenance and stuff like that on our website that I recommend you to use. They've been used by people that have been flying a very long time, and add and adjust it to what your needs are. But be sure you're also taking a look at the service bulletins every year. They exist for a reason when we do have them. We can't make you adhere to them, but again, they exist for a reason. And sometimes if that means you need to get a gearbox update because we have bigger and better things, it is in your best interest. It is not, we generally do service bulletins at cost and without the charge of labor. So we try our best to make that an easy thing for you and us, and make sure everybody is as safe as they can be. It is not something we are out here benefiting and profiting from, I promise you that. TBO kind of goes a little bit with maintenance. People ask about TBO all the time, which is kind of silly because for us, it's like a new core. It's a very simple process. You send it here, it's $2,000, $3,000, you have a new engine, so on and so forth, if you ever reach TBO to begin with. Not many ever will, unfortunately, in this room. That is just how it goes. Your average builder is flying 25 to 50 hours a year. I hope you guys fly more. A lot of people with Viking engines, because they're not nitpicking it 24/7, fly a lot more, and that's great, and that's what we like to hear. But your engine, and your engine, and your engine, and your engine will all have different TBOs depending on how you maintain them. I cannot give you and say that your engine is going to last 2,000 hours if you change the oil in 70-hour and 80-hour intervals like some people have done. And even when they've been beat to death, somehow they make it to 1,300 and 1,500 and 1,800 hours, even after kind of being torture tested. I mean, some of the maintenance is super important, and people, they'll go through their plane and they'll, I'll get that one later. Well, the later comes into the next one that gets later, and then, I'll do that one later. And then you have a list of laters, and your plane is not something I would get into. So don't let the list of laters kind of add up on you. It does add up. Spend the little bit when you need to. Do the proper maintenance. Check for chafing and wiring and everything that you're going to do. It's super important.
Well, what's the driver? Is the driver compression ratio? Is the driver? I'm just curious. What
The driver of TBO?
Yeah.
Maintenance.
Yeah.
Well, you would.
Maintenance, but at what point? Because it's not an actual TBO on the engines, right?
No experimentals actually have any
Well,
TBO,
you're going to
but-
start,
What do you worry about when you?
the same as a car. If you ever start blowing oil or losing compression, it'll still go a long ways, but as you get 2,500, 3,000 hours, you're going to start seeing something. In Blackstone Laboratory Reports is a good one. Like suddenly you got 10 times as much iron in the report as you ever had before.
They're going to
Those
be
are the
they're going to
things.
be silent things that you notice. It's not going to be like a Lycoming when you throw a rod. I mean, that's not going to be what happens, and people don't talk about that enough, that those are the types of problems that people have when it's a Lycoming and a Continental. We don't typically have internal engine issues. That's not something that is often happens.
They didn't promise. They said it won't be that much longer, so we'll see.
Okay. What are they doing?
They're smacking a bunch of rust off of a trailer.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
exciting. Welcome to the airport. So does anybody have any questions before I kind of move over to the next section there that I can maybe assist with? Trying to cover everything, but
One question. And
Yes.
That is, on using Declan with 100 low lead, I looked at Declan's website and they've got a tremendous range of concentration that they recommend.
yeah.
How much Declan do you recommend that you put in with a fuel mix of 100 low
Well,
lead?
right on here it tells you a half an ounce per 10 gallons of 100 low lead fuel.
Yeah.
Now you could use a little bit more if you'd like. It's not going to hurt it to use a little bit more.
Well, they
How much were you using? 2
they say
ounces,
as
1
much
ounce?
as 20 times that. I mean, to me, it was an incredible range of how much do you use.
Well,
You're
they-
not going to hurt, especially not the direct injected engines. So I would use whatever maximum. We don't like 100 low lead anyhow. Okay, so
This helps.
nobody wants to talk about that because like Rotax doesn't. They don't. It's not good for that engine to have lead in it. UL Power, whatever. None of them are made for the leaded fuel. The old engines were made for the leaded fuel. They had lots of clearances. Lead could slosh around there and all that. No modern engine of any sort is happy running leaded fuel. All right. That being said, sometimes you have to. So
to do a
yeah, because we have seen engines even with Declan that over time you will slowly start losing compression. Now at that point you can get it back, but that's strict car fuel diet for a long time.
Car fuel diet.
Compression will slowly start coming back again. I don't know anything about it, so. Yeah, there's all kinds of claims for all kinds of things, but lead is lead, and it will deposit itself wherever it wants to deposit itself. So use as little as possible.
I want to step on maintenance a little bit here because this is important. We're not, as long as you use the type of oil that is recommended for these, we're not brand specific on what type of engine oil you use. However, we do like to see a certain kind of gear oil. We've done a lot of testing and a lot of them will foam. A lot more, I don't care what claims they make, marketing is marketing, and there's a lot of false claims. So we like to see Mobil 1 or even Valvoline gear oil in there. Things like Royal Purple and all these other things. I mean, we do not know. If you start using things that are outside our limitations, we're not going to be able to kind of warrant whatever happens internally to that. So because we have not fully tested it, both of those are pretty readily available. So just try to use what we recommend, please. And don't ever veer off of the oil that's recommended because of the clearances in these engines. You know, if we say 0W20, use 0W20.
I've
And
had people that call me and it's like they're using Aeroshell in our.
He did, and yes, that was a true story. Actually, we had some left over, so we just used it. Okay. You'd laugh if you heard some of the phone calls sometimes, but it's That's why we try to dummy-proof things as much as possible. We all mean the best, but that doesn't mean we're always doing the best. I'm going to move on to the next slide here, if I can do this. Maybe I can. Just kidding. We can.
Where's the actual projector?
It's there.
Yeah.
I just can't see because it's on the white. It's going to go in a second. Hold on. And hold. There you go. See how I did that? Okay, so now we're going to start stepping into some of the items on the table. That there, by the way, is a Rand's S20 with S21 metal wings. I don't believe Rand's will sell those like that anymore, but this gentleman actually won an award at Oshkosh for their build quality and everything. They were on our booth one year, and it's a miraculous airplane. They take it to V&E. They took it to V&E so much one time the whole roof flew off. So they do a lot with that, and I think they have over 700 hours on it. Last time I checked, they've been using it as a trainer. So it's a great little airplane. Jan, if you want to dive into some of the electrical components, I'm going to leave that to you. I stay out of electrical. If you guys call me and ask electrical questions, I don't want to know anything else or anything more about electrical or fuel systems. I will hand you to this man. My brain is full. So carry on.
Well, some people actually like to do electrical wiring. No?
Some people
because
do.
it's satisfying when it's done. You get your like nice bundles, and it works, you know. And it's intimidating to other people, and they don't want nothing to do with it. But it is just one wire at a time. You know, it's one wire, another wire, another wire, another wire. And you can learn anything. Home building, you're supposed to. The whole thing is about learning about how to do it. Like, you know, you learn a little bit about engines. You don't have to build a whole engine. I don't believe in any of that bullshit. You don't have to build your own engine. But you should know about your engine. Wiring, you don't have to know everything there is to know about wiring, but you can learn to put in the wires that you need to have in your airplane. And you can learn enough about 12-volt DC electrical that you understand that there's a positive and negative and so forth and so on. But for those that are very intimidated by it and you know, want to buy some of the things finished, we do have that, you know, like pre-wired stuff. Don't order it because that means I have to sit down and do it. We also have other things to make it easier. Like we have battery boxes for the Odyssey batteries. We have like an Avionics tray. You would think that this would be built into the airplane, but particularly like on a Zenith or whatever, the room behind the instrument panel to the firewall, you need something to mount everything. So this is just a little thing you can mount all your components to, like you know, your bus bars and your contactors, your batteries, all that kind of stuff. So this is more like a universal piece. And then there's another piece, and this is it's not specific for Zenith because you can mount this anywhere in the airplane, but they fit perfectly between the instrument panel bar across and the firewall if it happens to be a Zenith. And here this is more of a specific one where, you know, you actually have holes that fit our other components. You know, it's all laid out for you and all that. So we have that available. As far as the tooling, you know, you're going to need something to strip wire with. These are nice. Sometimes aviation wires can be a little funny because they'll have different thicknesses of Tefcel or Teflon jackets versus the gauge cable. And some of these are made like more for automotive cable. So, you know, you test them. You put it in the right groove and you test it, and you see if it comes out. If you check your wire, make sure that you didn't nick any of the strands. So you do a couple of tests to familiarize yourself with your own tool. One trick that I've learned is, let's say you got to be on the one that's next bigger, but it doesn't want a clean pull. Use the smaller one and just cut the insulation, then move it to the next bigger and pull off the insulation. So that's something that I do sometimes because of the differences between automotive wiring and aviation wiring. You've seen something similar to this, which is basically the pliers that you squeeze your connectors with. Spend a little extra money and get a ratcheting one because you get so much more power. For your cables,
These all come in a wiring kit, by the way, and we sell these tools individually. If you don't know exactly what kind to get, you can buy them through us, but they're things that you can find on your own as well.
there's different kinds of lug crimpers, and that's for your battery cables. You use something like that, and you have different dies, or you can rotate the dies. These, by the way, even Amazon, you can get 10 packs of these, and you're going to use them all over the place. And they're nothing fancy, they're just little dikes, but they are the flush cutting kind, so you can really get up close and cut tie wraps and wires and stuff. Real handy. They last a little while. You throw it out, get another pair out of your drawer. Contactors, okay, the basic contactors. They're not starter relays. They're contactors to stay on the whole time when your airplane is up and running. We use 2 of them in our system because we'd like you to have a primary and a backup. We don't want you to have some kind of fancy electrical system that one is charging the other through a diode and some, real smart system. We want a dumb, simple system, meaning you have one battery with one contactor, one battery with another contactor. You hit one on, you're using this battery. Hit the other one on, you're using that battery. You have them both on, you're using both batteries. And when one is on, it's also being charged. And when both are on, they're both being charged. And so basically you turn one battery. There's one electrical system, but you can turn a battery in or out of that system. That's how I look at it. You don't want any fancier than that, but you should have like a dual system. The way that you fly it as a pilot, the way you view your battery or your electrical system is that I have one electrical system with 2 batteries, which means I do my starts, my taxiing, my takeoffs, all that stuff on 2 batteries. I do all my local flights on 2 batteries, which means the 2 batteries are now like one battery. They're both on. Everything's being charged, everything. If something ever happens, I'm flying locally and all that stuff, I have everything on. When I leave the traffic pattern and I go on a cross-country flight, that's when you put one battery on standby. You turn one off, okay? That's how you think of it. You just turn it off. Then, if your alternator failed half an hour into the flight and you didn't notice it, or whatever's happening, or one battery, the other battery's going bad or something, now you have a fully charged battery that you can turn into the system. And now you can fly to an airport and so on.